Welcome back to the Vale Echo, where we uncover the hidden stories buried beneath time. Tonight's tale begins in a quiet American town, the kind of place where everyone knows each other or thinks they do. But beneath its calm surface lies a mystery that haunted generations, a cold case that refused to die. It was a foggy morning when it all started again. The streets were empty, the world still half asleep, but in a small apartment above a bookstore, a young man stared at his laptop screen. He wasn't a detective, not even close. Just an ordinary person with an extraordinary obsession: unsolved mysteries. His desk was a chaos of coffee stains, scattered notes, and fatting newspaper clippings. Headlines screamed words like "missing woman, no leads, case closed." But to him, it was anything but closed. He leaned closer to the screen, replaying an old news report from the 1980s. The face of a missing woman flickered across the video, a life cut short, a family left in silence. No one had found her. No one had answered the questions that still whispered through the town's history. That was the moment he decided, if no one else would find the truth, he would. He began gathering everything he could: old police records, forgotten witness statements, and local legends. The cold case file he managed to get hold of was yellowed with age, the ink fading but the pain still fresh. Inside were black and white photos, a few pieces of evidence, and the official words, "case inactive." It was a label that burned in his mind. On the wall behind him, he pinned the first photo, a smiling young woman from another time. One by one, he added more: the suspect's sketches, a map of the town, red string connecting points that didn't yet make sense. His small apartment slowly transformed into an investigation room, a living timeline of a forgotten tragedy. Outside, the town continued as if nothing ever happened. Children played in the park, people sipped coffee in diners, and yet, beneath every friendly smile was a story no one dared to tell. The sleuth walked the same streets where the victim had once lived, tracing her steps, stopping where she was last seen. He could almost feel her presence in the air, like a voice calling for justice. At night, he pored over the clues under the flicker of a dim desk lamp. Each photograph, each word felt like a puzzle piece fighting to be understood. He wasn't just chasing facts, he was chasing ghosts. Somewhere out there was the truth, waiting to be unearthed by someone who cared enough to look. As the rain tapped against the window, he stared at the wall of clues. In that silent room filled with memories and shadows, something stirred inside him, a spark. The kind of spark that ignites revolutions, that refuses to fade. He whispered to himself, every secret leaves a trace. And so began the story of one ordinary man who dared to challenge time itself, to solve the mystery everyone else had forgotten. The hunt for truth had just begun. Night after night, the small desk lamp was the only light burning in the room. Papers scattered across the table, maps pinned to the wall, red strings connecting faces and places, a mind tangled in mystery. The amateur sleuth leaned closer to his laptop, the blue glow reflecting in his tired eyes. Each click of the mouse, each note scribbled in the margins, brought him a little closer to the truth. Somewhere in the noise of old data and forgotten files lay the clue that everyone else had missed. He dove into the archives, dust dancing in the thin beams of light filtering through narrow windows. Shelves lined with files long ignored stood like tombstones of unsolved pain. He flipped through yellowed pages, fingers brushing the name of the woman whose story had vanished decades ago. A cold chill ran down his spine. It wasn't just a case anymore, it was personal. Late hours bled into dawn. Coffee cups piled up beside him as he traced patterns between newspaper clippings and police statements. He read the same words hundreds of times, searching for what others didn't see. Then something clicked, a name that appeared in two different reports in two different cities years apart. His heart raced. Could this be the thread that ties it all together? He traveled miles to speak with the forgotten voices of the past. In a small-town cafe, an elderly man's shaky voice recounted the night of the disappearance. The details were faint, but one thing stood out: an unfamiliar car parked near the woods. The sleuth wrote every word carefully, knowing this single lead could reopen a door that had been closed for too long. Back in his room, he pinned a new photo to the board and stepped back. The strings of red thread stretched tighter now, connecting timelines, locations, and people. The evidence began to form a story, one that the police never pieced together. His heart pounded as he realized the pattern pointed toward someone close to the original investigation. He searched deeper, hacking through public records, social media archives, and forgotten forums. Late one night he found it, a digital footprint that shouldn't exist. A photo posted years later showing a car identical to the one the witness described. He zoomed in, the reflection in the window revealing a faint, familiar face. The puzzle was no longer scattered, it was screaming the truth. The next morning, he walked into the local police station, files in hand, determination in his eyes. The officers exchanged skeptical glances, dismissing him as just another conspiracy chaser. But when he laid down the evidence, photos, names, dates, DNA reports, the room fell silent. The pieces fit too perfectly to ignore. As he left the station, the sun began to set, painting the town in amber light. The air felt different, heavy with the weight of discovery. He had done what no one else dared, reignited a flame in a case long turned to ash. The hunt wasn't over yet, but for the first time he could feel it. The truth was within reach. The breakthrough had shaken everything. The sleuth could hardly sleep as his mind replayed every clue, every photograph, every whispered detail. The face from that old photograph haunted him, the reflection in the car window, the link no one else had dared to see. Now, it was time to bring light to what had been buried for decades. He revisited the crime scene, now overgrown and silent. The forest stood like a graveyard of memories, police tape long faded into the earth. He stood there in the fog, eyes closed, imagining that night all over again, the footsteps, the struggle, the silence that followed. Somewhere between those trees, the truth had waited patiently to be found. Back at his desk, he gathered every piece of evidence into one cohesive story. Photos of the victim, the suspect, the car, and the map, all lined up perfectly. He recorded every moment, every connection, as though the board itself had become a living witness. His heart raced as he typed the final details, his hands trembling, not from fear, but from the realization that justice was no longer a dream. He contacted the detective who once led the case. At first, disbelief filled the officer's voice, but when the sleuth showed him the proof, the matching fingerprints, the timeline, the motive, the officer's expression shifted from doubt to shock. Together, they revisited the evidence, comparing it to the old reports. There it was, undeniable, a hidden link that had been ignored for years. Within days, the police reopened the case. Forensic teams re-examined the old evidence under new light, and everything aligned just as the sleuth had said. DNA tests confirmed what had been buried in whispers. The real culprit wasn't a stranger, it was someone trusted, someone close to the investigation. The arrest came at dusk. Red and blue lights flashed through the quiet streets as officers moved in. The sleuth watched from a distance, his face lit by the flickering glow. The man who had once thought he'd escaped justice was finally led away in handcuffs, his expression empty, his silence louder than words. The town gathered, stunned by the revelation. After all these years, the cold case was no longer cold. Later that night, the sleuth sat alone by his window. The rain tapped softly against the glass as the TV reported the story he had dedicated his life to solving. Cold case solved after decades, the headline read, his name mentioned briefly among the credits, but fame wasn't what he wanted, only truth. He picked up the victim's faded photograph from his desk, setting it beside the newspaper. For a moment, he closed his eyes and smiled. The ghosts had finally been heard. The woman whose story was silenced had her voice back, and the shadows that once hid the truth were gone. Outside, the first light of dawn broke through the clouds, painting the town in gold. Justice had come not from power or authority, but from one man's relentless heart. And with that, the cold case was finally laid to rest.